My name is Michael Foster, and I never intended to become known as the Lion Whisperer. That title came later, after the video went viral and media outlets across the world picked up the story. What happened that day on the banks of the Luangwa River wasn't planned. It wasn't a stunt, and it certainly wasn't something I'd recommend anyone else try. But it changed my life forever. For the past 12 years, I've worked as a wildlife conservationist and guide at the Mfu Lodge in Zambia's South Luangwa National Park. I've spent thousands of hours observing lions in their natural habitat, documenting their behaviors, and leading tourists on safaris to witness these magnificent creatures from a safe distance. I thought I understood them, their territorial nature, their hunting patterns, their social dynamics. I was wrong. It was the height of the rainy season. February 2023. The Luangwa River had swollen beyond its banks, transforming much of the surrounding savanna into temporary wetlands. These seasonal floods are natural and necessary for the ecosystem, but they can create dangerous situations for wildlife. Animals can become stranded on shrinking islands of dry land, cut off from their territories and food sources. That morning had started routinely enough. I was taking water level readings near a section of the park we call Hippo Bend, accompanied by my colleague Joseph Bander, one of the park's most experienced rangers. We were in a small motorboat, navigating the swollen river to document the flood's impact on wildlife movements. "Mike, look there," Joseph said suddenly, pointing toward a commotion in the water about 50 yards ahead. Through my binoculars, I could make out a large animal struggling against the current. "Lion," I said, recognizing the distinctive shape of its head above the water. "Young male, I think." Joseph immediately steered our boat in that direction. Lions can swim when necessary, but they generally avoid deep water. This one was clearly in distress, its powerful limbs thrashing against the current that was pulling it toward the river's center where the flow was strongest. "He's going to drown if we don't do something," I said, already reaching for the rescue equipment we kept aboard for emergencies, usually involving capsized tourist canoes, not drowning predators. Joseph looked at me skeptically. "Mike, that's a lion. Not a person." "It's still alive," I replied. The lion was part of a pride we had monitored for years, a young male about 3 years old, just entering his prime. Conservationists like us don't typically intervene in nature's processes. But this wasn't a natural situation. Increased human development upriver had altered the flood patterns, making them more sudden and severe than what the wildlife had evolved to handle. As we drew closer, I could see the lion was nearly exhausted. Its head kept dipping below the surface, emerging with less frequency. There was no time for debate or careful planning. "Get us alongside him," I instructed Joseph, stripping off my jacket and shoes. "Keep the engine running to counter the current." "You can't be serious," Joseph said. But he maneuvered the boat as directed, his years of experience on the river evident in his precise control. "Just be ready to pull us both in," I said, securing a rescue rope around my waist and handing the other end to Joseph. Before he could object further, I slipped over the side of the boat into the muddy water. The river was cold despite the African heat, its current stronger than it appeared from above. I swam toward the struggling lion, keeping my movements as steady and non-threatening as possible. The big cat saw me approaching and let out a weak roar, a sound more of fear than aggression. "It's okay," I said in the calm, low voice I'd used around wild animals for years. "I'm going to help you." I knew, of course, that the lion couldn't understand my words, but animals respond to tone and energy. I needed to project confidence and calm, not fear or excitement that might further agitate the already stressed predator. When I reached the lion, it had nearly stopped struggling, a dangerous sign of exhaustion. Up close, I could see it was even younger than I'd initially thought, probably just past adolescence. Its amber eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and what I could only interpret as desperate hope. I positioned myself beside rather than in front of the animal, respecting its personal space as much as possible in the circumstances. "Let's get you to shore," I said, gently placing my hands under its body to help it stay afloat. To my amazement, the lion didn't lash out, perhaps too exhausted to fight, or perhaps understanding on some primal level that I represented its only chance at survival. It allowed me to support its weight in the water. Joseph had maneuvered the boat as close as he dared, but the current made it impossible to bring the lion directly aboard without risking capsizing. "Now the sandbar," he called, pointing to a small island of silt about 30 yards downstream. "The current will help you." I nodded, conserving my breath as I guided the lion in that direction, using the river's flow to our advantage rather than fighting against it. The big cat seemed to understand the plan, its powerful legs beginning to paddle more purposefully as I supported its hindquarters. Those 30 yards felt like miles. The lion was heavy, its waterlogged coat adding to the weight. My arms burned with the effort of keeping both of us afloat while navigating the current. Joseph kept pace in the boat, ready to intervene if either of us went under. Finally, my feet touched the silty bottom of the sandbar. The lion sensed the ground beneath us and lunged forward, dragging itself onto the temporary island. I followed, collapsing onto my hands and knees in the mud, my lungs heaving with exertion. For a moment, we both just breathed. Man and lion, side by side on a small patch of earth in the middle of a swollen river. The lion lay on its side, rib cage expanding and contracting rapidly, water streaming from its golden coat. I remained a respectful distance away, giving it space while I recovered my own strength. Joseph brought the boat alongside the sandbar. "Mike, come on," he urged, eyeing the lion warily. "You've done what you could. Let's go before it recovers enough to remember it's a predator." I knew he was right. What I'd done was against every safety protocol and common sense. Now that the immediate danger of drowning had passed, the natural order would reassert itself. A wild lion, even a young one, was unpredictable and potentially lethal. I began backing toward the boat, keeping my eyes on the lion, moving slowly to avoid triggering its predatory instincts. The big cat raised its head, watching me retreat. Our eyes locked, and something passed between us, some wordless communication I still struggle to articulate. Then the lion did something that stopped me in my tracks. It rose unsteadily to its feet, shook the water from its coat like an oversized house cat, and took a step toward me. Joseph shouted a warning, already reaching for the tranquilizer rifle we kept for emergencies, but I held up my hand, signaling him to wait. The lion's body language wasn't aggressive. No lowered head, no flattened ears, no bared teeth. Instead, it moved with what I could only describe as deliberate calm. 3 more steps, and it was directly in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat of its breath. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to dive for the boat, to put distance between myself and those powerful jaws that could crush my skull with a single bite. Instead, I held my ground, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain the lion could hear it. What happened next would be captured on Joseph's phone camera and would soon astonish millions around the world. The lion raised its right paw and extended it toward me, almost like a person offering a handshake. It hung there in the air between us, this impossible gesture that defied everything I knew about wild animal behavior. Time seemed to suspend as I stared at the outstretched paw, water still dripping from its fur. "Mike," Joseph warned from the boat, his voice tight with tension. But something deep within me, instinct, intuition, madness perhaps, told me this was a moment of profound significance. Slowly, giving the lion every opportunity to withdraw, I extended my own right hand. The lion lowered its massive paw into my palm, its rough pads pressing against my skin, claws mercifully retracted. For 3 heartbeats, we remained connected, human hand clasping lion paw in what could only be described as a deliberate point of contact. Then, as if satisfied with this exchange, the lion withdrew its paw, gave a slight nod that seemed almost human in its intentionality, and turned away. It walked to the far edge of the sandbar, sat down facing the riverbank, and waited, as if expecting the next stage of its rescue. Joseph was filming now, having recovered enough from his shock to document what was happening. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured, his earlier fear giving way to awe. "Never in 25 years working with wildlife." "Neither have I," I admitted, still processing what had just occurred. My hand tingled where the lion had touched it, not from any injury, but from the sheer improbability of the contact. We had a new problem now. The sandbar was temporary, already shrinking as the river continued to rise with the season's heavy rains. We needed to get the lion to the main shoreline, but our small boat couldn't safely transport both of us and a 400-pound predator. "I'll radio for the larger boat," Joseph suggested, reaching for the communication equipment. "There's no time," I replied, noticing how the water was already encroaching on our small haven. "The current's getting stronger, and he's still exhausted. He might not survive another swim." I made a decision that, in retrospect, was even more foolhardy than my initial rescue attempt. "I'm going to guide him to shore." Joseph stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You're going to what?" "Look at him," I said, gesturing toward the lion, who remained calmly seated, occasionally glancing back at us. "He's not acting like a typical wild lion. Something's different here. I think he knows we're trying to help." Before Joseph could object further, I waded back into the water, positioning myself beside the lion. "Come on," I said, using the same calm, encouraging tone I'd used earlier. "Let's get you home." To my colleague's visible disbelief, the lion stood and followed me into the water. Joseph kept the boat nearby as we began our swim to shore, ready to intervene if the situation changed, but the lion maintained a peaceful demeanor, swimming alongside me with more strength than before, occasionally looking over as if to ensure I was still there. The swim to the main shoreline took nearly 15 minutes, fighting against sections of current that threatened to sweep us downstream. By the time we reached the shallows, I was completely spent, my muscles burning from the extended exertion. The lion, too, showed signs of fatigue, but it pressed forward with determination until we both collapsed on the muddy bank. Joseph brought the boat to shore a short distance away, approaching cautiously with the tranquilizer rifle now in hand. "Mike, move away from it slowly," he directed. "You've done enough. Let's not push our luck." I knew he was right. Whatever unusual connection had formed between the lion and me during the rescue, it was still a wild predator, one that would normally see humans as either a threat or potential prey. I began to back away, expecting the lion to shake itself off and disappear into the bush now that it was safely ashore. Instead, it followed me. "Stop moving," Joseph said tensely, raising the rifle to his shoulder. I froze, and the lion stopped, too, maintaining the same few feet of distance between us. It showed no signs of aggression, no flattened ears, no snarling, no crouched stance that would indicate an imminent attack. Instead, it simply stood there watching me with an intensity that felt almost like communication. "I think he's injured," I said, noticing for the first time that the lion was favoring its left hind leg. And that might be why he was in the river to begin with. He might have been trying to cross at a shallow point and got swept away. Joseph lowered the rifle slightly, but remained vigilant. "If he's injured, he's even more dangerous. Wounded predators are unpredictable." He was right again, but the lion's behavior continued to contradict everything we knew about wild animal responses. It made no attempt to flee or to assert dominance. Instead, it simply waited, its gaze fixed on me with what I could only interpret as expectation. "I need to check his leg," I said, making a decision that went against all wildlife management protocols. "Absolutely not," Joseph objected. "We've already pushed well beyond safety limits. We should tranquilize him now if you want to help further." The problem with tranquilizing was that the drugs took time to metabolize out of the system. An already weakened animal might not handle the additional stress well. And something told me this unusual moment of trust would be broken if we took that approach. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "Keep the rifle ready. If he shows any sign of aggression, do what you need to do." Before Joseph could argue further, I slowly knelt down, making myself less threatening. The lion watched, then, to my continued amazement, it laid down as well, extending its left hind leg slightly as if presenting the injury for examination. I inched closer, moving with deliberate slowness, talking softly the entire time. "I just want to see what's wrong, big guy. Just trying to help you out a little more." When I was within arm's reach, I paused, giving the lion time to reconsider this unprecedented interaction. It remained still, only its tail twitching slightly at the tip, a sign of attention rather than agitation. With extreme caution, I extended my hand toward the injured leg. The lion watched, but made no move to stop me. I gently touched the area above what appeared to be a deep puncture wound just above the animal's hock. The flesh around it was swollen and hot to the touch. Signs of infection. "He's got a serious wound here," I called to Joseph, who was documenting everything on his phone. "Looks like a puncture, maybe from a fight with another male or an encounter with a buffalo. It's infected." This explained the lion's unusual behavior. The infection was likely causing fever, disorientation, and weakness, which might have contributed to it being caught in the river current. It also potentially explained its atypical response to human intervention. Animals in distress sometimes display behaviors outside their normal patterns. "We need antibiotics and to clean that wound," I said, carefully moving back from the lion, who made no move to follow this time. "Radio the veterinary team. Tell them we need Dr. Mwansa out here as soon as possible." Joseph made the call while I maintained a watchful but non-threatening presence near the injured lion. Within 20 minutes, we heard the approach of the park's veterinary jeep. Dr. Lena Mwansa, the park's head veterinarian, had responded personally to the unusual situation Joseph had described. She approached cautiously, tranquilizer gun in hand, expecting to need to sedate the lion for treatment. She stopped short when she saw the scene, me sitting on the ground a few feet from the lion, who remained calm despite the arrival of another human. "And what in the world is happening here, Mike?" she asked, her expression a mixture of professional concern and undisguised astonishment. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, "but I think he knows we're trying to help him." Dr. Mwansa had worked with wildlife for over 20 years and had seen animals do remarkable things, but the scene before her clearly exceeded even her extensive experience. "He needs antibiotics and wound treatment," I explained. "Left hind leg, above the hock. Deep puncture. Infected." She nodded, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency despite its unprecedented nature. "We should still sedate him for proper treatment. Even if he's being cooperative now, the treatment will be painful. He could react instinctively." I looked at the lion, who had been watching our exchange with alert interest. "I think you're right," I conceded. "But let's use the lowest effective dose. He's already weakened from the river and the infection." Dr. Mwansa prepared the tranquilizer dart with a carefully calculated dose. The lion watched her movements, but remained calm, as if somehow understanding that this new development was part of the help being offered. When she raised the dart gun, I spoke softly to the lion. "This is going to help you feel better, but it's going to sting a little first. Just like when you helped me in the river, I'm asking you to trust me now." The tranquilizer took effect quickly. The lion's eyes grew heavy, his massive head gradually lowering to rest on his paws before he slipped into sedated sleep. Dr. Mwansa moved in efficiently, cleaning and treating the infected wound while Joseph and I assisted. "This puncture is deep," she commented, flushing the wound with antiseptic solution. "Probably from a buffalo horn based on the angle and size. He's lucky it didn't hit an artery." She administered a long-acting antibiotic injection and applied medicated salve to the area. "The infection is significant. He wouldn't have survived much longer without treatment, especially after that river ordeal." "Will he recover?" I asked, helping to hold equipment as she worked. "With proper care?" "Yes. But he'll need follow-up treatment." She glanced at me thoughtfully. "This behavior is extraordinary, Mike. In 20 years of wildlife medicine, I've never seen a wild lion respond to humans this way. We should document everything carefully." "Way ahead of you, Doctor," Joseph said. "I've got it all. The river rescue, the handshake, everything up to now." We worked quickly to complete the treatment before the tranquilizer wore off. Dr. Mwansa attached a small tracking device to the lion's ear, standard procedure for monitored wildlife in the park, but especially important in this unusual case. "He should sleep for another hour," she said as we packed up the medical supplies. "We should move away before he wakes." Even with this unprecedented behavior, he's still a wild predator coming out of sedation. I knew she was right, but leaving felt strangely difficult. This lion and I had shared something profound, something that defied conventional understanding of human-wildlife interaction. Reluctantly, I helped gather the remaining equipment, taking one last look at the sleeping lion before retreating to the vehicles parked a safe distance away. We established an observation post on higher ground, watching through binoculars as the lion eventually stirred, groggy at first, then with increasing alertness. He examined his treated leg, sniffing at the medication before rising to test his weight on it. Already his movements seemed less pained. To our surprise, instead of immediately heading into the bush, the lion looked around, seemingly searching for something, or someone. His gaze eventually found our vehicles on the hillside. For a long moment, he stared in our direction before offering what appeared to be a final acknowledgement, a slight dip of his massive head. Then he turned and disappeared into the tall grass. "Did you see that?" Joseph whispered, still filming. It was like he was saying goodbye. "Or thank you," I suggested, equally moved by the moment. Dr. Mwansa was more measured in her response, though I could see even her scientific skepticism had been challenged by what we'd witnessed. "We should be careful about anthropomorphizing," she said, "but I admit this is exceptional. We'll monitor him closely through the tracking device." Word of the unusual rescue spread quickly through the park staff, though we agreed to keep it contained until we had more information about the lion's progress. Over the next week, I joined the wildlife management team in tracking the lion's movements via his new ear tag. He stayed within his pride's territory, but remained somewhat separated, likely allowing his leg to heal before rejoining the demanding social life of the group. 10 days after the river incident, I was reviewing camera trap footage with Joseph when we spotted our lion on one of the recordings. He was moving with much more ease, the treatment clearly having reduced the infection. More surprisingly, he was accompanied by another male, likely a coalition partner, as lions often form these male alliances for territorial defense and pride takeover. "He's looking good," Joseph observed. "Seems the antibiotics did their job." I nodded, relieved to see the improvement. "Dr. Mwansa wants to get another dose into him if possible. She's concerned about recurrence of the infection." "How are you planning to do that?" Joseph said with a wry smile. "I doubt we'll get another river rescue opportunity." His question was valid. Darting the lion from a distance was possible, but risked disturbing both the animal and his natural behaviors, something we tried to minimize in our conservation work. The question became moot. The following morning, I was checking water quality samples at one of the smaller watering holes when Joseph radioed with urgency in his voice. "Mike. You need to come to the North Road lookout. Now." "What's happening?" I asked, already packing up my equipment. "It's your lion. He's here. And he's not alone." 20 minutes later, I pulled up beside Joseph's vehicle at the lookout point. He was standing beside it, binoculars raised, an expression of disbelief on his face. "Look," he said simply, handing me the binoculars and pointing. About 200 yards away, at the edge of the clearing, stood our lion. Beside him was his coalition partner, and behind them, partially obscured by brush, were the shadowy forms of several lionesses, his pride. But what made my breath catch was what lay at his feet, the body of a freshly killed impala. As we watched, the lion looked directly toward us, then deliberately stepped away from the kill, moving several yards back, taking his coalition partner with him through what appeared to be subtle communication. The lionesses remained in the background, watching but not approaching. He's offering us his kill," Joseph whispered incredulously. "I've heard old legends from village elders about lions showing gratitude, but I never believed them until now." I wasn't sure what to believe myself, but the lion's behavior was undeniably intentional. After ensuring his companions maintained their distance, he settled onto his haunches, watching us expectantly. I radioed Dr. Mwansa, who arrived 30 minutes later with her veterinary team. She assessed the situation with professional caution. "This is an unprecedented opportunity," she admitted. We can use the kill site to administer the follow-up antibiotics without darting him. But we need to be extremely careful. The other lions may not share his unusual tolerance. We developed a quick plan. Using the vehicles as safety barriers, Dr. Mwansa prepared a meat portion injected with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. I would place it near the original kill, making it clear which portion was intended for our lion. As I approached the kill site, carrying the medicated meat on a long pole, the lion watched calmly. His companion and the lionesses were more alert, some standing tensely, but they took cues from our lion's relaxed demeanor. I placed the meat portion separate from the main kill, and backed away slowly. The lion approached immediately, sniffed the medicated meat, then consumed it completely while maintaining eye contact with me across the distance. Only after he finished did he return to the main kill, allowing his coalition partner and eventually the lionesses to approach and feed. Over the following months, the story of the handshake lion, as park staff had nicknamed him, became something of a legend in conservation circles. The video Joseph had taken went viral after National Geographic featured it in a special on unusual animal behaviors, sparking intense debate among wildlife experts worldwide. Some scientists suggested the lion had previous human contact, perhaps being an orphaned cub raised by humans before release, though our records showed no such released lions in the area. Others proposed more physiological explanations. The infection had caused fever-induced behavioral changes, or the stress of near-drowning had temporarily altered his natural fear responses. I maintained a more personal theory, one I shared only with Joseph and Dr. Mwansa during our continued monitoring of the lion's progress. Some connections transcend species, occurring in moments of mutual vulnerability and need. For a brief time, the lion and I had moved beyond our natural roles as predator and potential prey, forming something else, a momentary alliance based on recognition of another being suffering, and the simple act of helping. 1 year after the river rescue, I was leading a small group of conservation donors on a special tour of the park. As we stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the valley, a familiar form emerged from the tall grass about 50 yards away, our lion, now fully recovered, his mane fuller and more magnificent than before. He paused, looking directly at our vehicle, at me. "Is that him?" whispered one of the donors, having heard the story that had now become part of the park's conservation message. "Yes," I confirmed quietly. "That's him." The lion held my gaze for a long moment before raising his right paw slightly, not fully extended as before, but lifted just enough to be noticeable. Deliberate. Then he turned and melted back into the golden grass of the savannah, a sovereign creature of the wild who had, for one extraordinary moment, reached across the divide between our worlds. Some connections need no explanation or scientific validation. They simply are, profound moments that remind us that in this vast, complex web of life on Earth, we are all, in our own ways, reaching for understanding and connection across the boundaries that seem to divide us.